Gauntlet, Legend, Dark Legacy, Legendary Heroes. Chapter 16, In the Toxic Mine. Deep in the depths of the mines of the ice domain, the Yeti stomped through the chamber closest to the strange glowing rock in the mine. It pleased the Yeti to see the rock was affecting the selected captives he had placed there. The already mutated dwarfs had done a good job of securing those prisoners. Some of the prisoners were already taking on a purplish hue. Some were even getting taller and losing their beards. It was a sight the Yeti liked to see. He moved onto his den, grabbing one of the dwarfs that was in line to be mutated. He could already smell that this one was slightly stronger-willed. This meant they also might be aware of what happened to the dwarf that had transformed, and even dared handle the vile mystical fire that could harm him. He had to know where both were. Once they were in the den, he lifted the dwarf up to his face and growled, "So, dwarf, where's the dwarf that held that vile fire? Where have they gone?" He was hoping to get an answer, but he was ready in case this one wasn't smart. As was expected, the dwarf wasn't as helpful as they could have been. The dwarf just started spitting and cursing out the Yeti. "You vile creature! I had no bloody idea where your bloody spy is gone. If I had my hammer or my war axe, I'd show you what a real dwarf can do." The Yeti heard the dwarf start another swearing tirade, so the Yeti just threw the creature to one of the mutated polar bears that had been in the cavern. The Yeti took great pleasure as the swearing turned to screams of pain and eventually to the gurgle of death. He enjoyed it so much he had even started to gnaw on another dwarf's arm. Maybe the sight of him chewing on the arm would loosen the tongues of some of the more weak-willed prisoners. The momentary snack, however, was interrupted by the arrival of some of the mutated minions, and they were bringing in a few items. He could see that two of them were rune stones, as he could feel the magic radiating from them, each etched with a red rune. The other item was a golden lamp with a faint black cloud hovering near its opening. That lamp also radiated magic, but the Yeti felt it wasn't a threat, even though the magic he sensed from it was similar to the cursed flame of Tarkana. As he looked at them, he watched as some of the mutated miners moved forward, and in his garbled voice said, "Master, we found these items and knew you would know what to do with them. We feel they must be important." The Yeti figured the radiation from the strange stone hindered their ability to think, but not enough that they didn't know they should obey him. He watched them, and then pointed away from his lair. "Take them to separate places, and guard them with the various elements. Seal that lamp deep in the frozen caves covered in snow. Take one of the runes and submerge it in ice, while the other should be kept in flame. I'm sure you can figure out the appropriate place, but if you need help..." The Yeti waved a hand, and soon some of the giant ice worms erupted out of the ground. "The worms can help you." He watched as the miners nodded and headed off, the strange ice worms following them. Those ice worms were amazing creatures, as they could erupt from the snow and still be buried in it without leaving any marks. He wondered if they had spent too much time near the strange mutating stone. At least they were obedient and even though they ate the occasional mutated miner. He was broken out of those thoughts, however, when the image of Scorn appeared in front of him. He understood his place when it came to Scorn, as he did his best to kneel. While he was covered in fur, the cold still had an effect on his joints. Being his size did have to move to prevent too much stiffness. "My lord Scorn, to what do I owe this honor?" He noticed that the image of his master was looking around before it responded to him. He wondered what that was about, but got his answer when his master finally spoke. "Yeti, has your minions brought you any magical items yet?" The Yeti noticed that his master sounded slightly worried, as if those items were extremely important. Determined not to anger his lord and master, the Yeti answered, "They were just brought in before you arrived. I had already issued them off to various hiding spots." He judged Scorn's face after he answered, and he could see that his leader was pleased. After a moment he was the focus of Scorn's attention. He was almost afraid that he had ticked off the demon, until he responded, "Very good. You have been the only one to hide them before I contacted. You have proven yourself once again as one of my better agents. I still, however, question the lack of use of ice columns. They would be very helpful, especially up on the surface." The Yeti laughed in polite amusement. The ice golems would be good on the surface, but he was sure the radiation from the strange stone, as well as the heat in some parts of the chasm, would weaken them. He then pointed over to the polar bear that was finishing its latest meal. "I acknowledge they might be helpful on the surface, but with the mutation done to the polar bears, they are more vicious, always hungry, and easy for me to control. They will be the perfect deterrent for any would-be heroes." He watched as Scorn laughed as well, and he could tell that his leader acknowledged his point. Once the laughter stopped, he heard his master say, "Very well. I will still send some of the lion gargoyles to you. They should get along well with those polar bears." The Yeti appreciated that. After hearing that, however, he heard Scorn say something that also comforted him. "I will let you know that the flames that are the bane of your existence are safely secreted in another realm. I have no doubt that it has been hidden in a very clever way, and no one shall be able to get it and get back to here." The Yeti nodded, and then looked over at the dwarves he had prisoner. Some of them had been watching this exchange, and no doubt were quaking in fear. The Yeti then said, "That is a comfort. However, I need to find where that damnable dwarf that turned into an ogre has gone. Only Tarkana had that gift, and it was no doubt that the dwarf that escaped was of their lineage." This was an obvious sore spot for both the Yeti and Scorn. While the heroes from the first time they were active were long dead, their bloodline had continued. Back then it had been 4 males and 4 females, although with dwarves it is hard to tell the difference. Tarkana had been a female dwarf, and so they had to make sure this one wasn't female as well. After a moment, one of the mutated miners had stepped forward and with obvious trepidation spoke. "My lord, I heard one of the prisoners speaking about that one that got away. Apparently, that one went into exile, and the one that spoke recently found out about the heritage of ogres and dwarves.
They were telling the others that she, referring to the exile, might be their best hope.
The Yeti nodded, taking in this information. The threat was outside of the realm, but no doubt the dwarves already took steps to isolate themselves from the threat. They had forgotten their own heritage, which meant they had done most of the work. He then looked at the miner and said,
Very good. Once your promotion is complete, I want you to execute that particular dwarf. No need to let them get too many of the younger dwarves and make them realize how foolish the older ones were.
With that, he froze the miner with his ice breath so the transformation could begin. It wouldn't take long, but as Scorn disappeared, obviously thankful of that news, the Yeti had given his minion the perfect reward. They had little to fear now.